So I'm going to give you another perspective from a woman of color. I appreciate that Jane made an effort to account for the fact that not everybody benefited the same way from the 19th Amendment. So I want to offer an alternative voice, and I'm here to say that the fact that the 19th Amendment concluded a century-long battle for equality by guaranteeing the right to vote is a myth, right? And there are a couple of problems with this assertion. The first one is that organizing occurred much before Seneca Falls in 1948, and a lot of that organizing came from women of color. And the second one is that the struggle took several additional decades to guarantee the right to vote to all women independently of their color. When we teach in this myth in our classroom, and I have done it before, we ignore that millions more remain shut out of the polls after ratification. Indeed, as middle-class white women celebrated ratification by parading through the streets, African-American women in the Jim Crow South who had worked for women's rights found themselves shut out of the ballot box for another half-century. As the historian Nancy Hewitt has shown, a lengthy campaign and a range of subsequent laws was required to fully open the ballot box to others, including Black women, Mexican American women, Native American women, Chinese American, and Korean American women. Among those necessary laws were the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1943, which banned Chinese immigration to this country, the adoption of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, which abolished racial restrictions to be naturalized in the United States, the 24th Amendment prohibiting poll taxes in 1964, and finally, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In other words, the 19th Amendment was one step in a long, racially tense battle for voting rights that seemed secure a few decades ago, but faced a grave threat today, as Jane mentioned. The white suffrage heroes got a lead on the historical record in 1881, and I'm referring to Stanton and Anthony, when they inaugurated the first volume of what would be called the History of Woman Suffrage. The duo and their cameras established an enduring legacy, and they designated Seneca Falls in 1848 as the starting point of the women's rights movement. In fact, the movement already was arousing in various forms and in various places. History of Women's Suffrage provides a detailed account of a movement that implicitly defined women as people who were white and middle class, and renders implicitly African American women, as well as Mexican American and other women, virtually invisible. For a long time, historians relied on this history and duplicated its omissions. The African American historian Rosalind Tabor Penn discredited this version of events by uncovering more than 100 black suffragists. In recent decades, historians have shown that black women were erased partly because they sensibly argued that gender discrimination and racism were interconnected problems that could not be neatly separated. Today, we call this intersectionality, and black suffragists were pioneers in arguing this. The 19th Amendment can fairly be seen as an important milestone in an unfinished fight for justice. It is morally wrong and counterproductive to mythologize it as a triumph of egalitarianism at a time where the voting rights are under attack in the courts and in state legislators all over the United States. Let's keep up the good fight. Thank you.